Hello, I'm Kevin Sharpley. I'm happy for everyone that has tuned into this virtual conversation with Mr. Gregory Allen Howard. He is one of the most iconic writers in Hollywood today. He's had a storied career. I'd like to say from Remember the Titans all the way to Harriet, but his career actually started before Remember the Titans. He's had a long and storied career, and I'm honored and privileged to be here with Mr. Gregory Allen Howard. How are you doing today?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Before we get the conversation started, um, if you all look at the chat in your Zoom, you're welcome to go ahead and write questions as we go. I know for myself, oftentimes I'll forget the question that I want to ask later on. And those questions will populate, and we're going to look through the questions and answer some of those questions. It's going to be an extended Q&A, so we'll have quite a while to field those questions. So, Mr. Howard, we want to kind of start from from the beginning, and we'll take it from there. Uh,
Okay.
where where are you from, sir?
I'm from Vallejo, sort of. I was born in Virginia, but I grew up in Vallejo in the Bay Area.
And did that shape where you're from, your writing? Did it shape your storytelling? Did it shape who you are? Or did it have to do with traveling? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
No, where I'm from didn't have any impact on my writing because I didn't know I wanted to be a writer until I went to college. So that came later. It didn't have anything to do with, the area where I was from.
So, were you raised there? Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Listen, I was from a Navy family and we moved around a lot. I went to high school in Northern California in Vallejo. And so I say I'm from there, but I'm really not from anywhere because, we moved around so much.
So, from that point, from where you were born, and you said that you really started being more interested when you went to college.
Right.
Where did you attend college?
Princeton.
Princeton. So, can you remember the spark? What kind of made you want to get
Oh,
into writing and even screenwriting?
well, it was writing initially, screenwriting was much later, but my initial spark was when I worked on my thesis. I was a history major, and everyone who graduates has to write a thesis, an undergraduate thesis, and I wrote mine. And in the process of writing, this 125-page book, my senior year, I had so much fun doing it that I decided I wanted to become a professional writer. Initially, I didn't know what kind of writing I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a magazine writer. This is when Time Magazine was, in its ascendancy. So I actually applied to Time Magazine, but they wouldn't hire me. I actually applied to journalism school, didn't get in. I applied to one, Medill in Chicago, didn't get in. And so I was kind of cut loose and ended up working on Wall Street. But I still wanted to be a writer. It's just, you need gainful employ to be a professional writer, and I couldn't find it at first.
Yeah. So you were going to go down different avenues of writing, but from what I understand, when you did go down that road towards writing, it wasn't screenwriting that you first ventured into. What was the first venture into writing?
I told you my thesis when I was a senior at Princeton. That was the first in-depth, long-form writing I did.
Yeah, in your professional career?
On my professional career. Well, the first check I got was for a story for 21 Jump Street, and which never aired. You know, I got a few grand for that. That was the beginning of what I'll call my professional writing career, because I got paid to write, which is pretty exciting. It wasn't sustainable, it didn't support me, but nevertheless, someone paid me to write. And that was sort of the beginning of it. And, you know, initially, this is in the early 90s, late 80s. You know, initially I was working in TV and I'd pick up an episode, a situation comedy, oddly enough. I'd pick up an episode here and there. And that was, but I didn't want to do situation comedy at all. But you go where, you know, when you first starting out, you go where people are paying you, and they were paying me to do that.
So when you were within that world of the situation comedy, were you writing other things? Were you thinking about writing other things?
I was writing hours and hours every single day. I was trying to learn the craft, and you know, I was writing screenplays. I was really working comedy because I thought that was my thing. And you know, I wrote comedy screenplays. I don't even know how many, and none of them sold. I mean, they weren't very good. And you know, that was kind of, I was, you know, I was kind of in that world. I was trying to write a comedy script that would sell for a lot of money, but it didn't happen, you know, but I kept on writing. And it was later that I realized that my gift was not in comedy, but in drama.
Yeah. So when you're writing all of the scripts around that time, did you have any idea how many scripts you wrote?
Yeah, I probably wrote 18 comedy scripts. Yeah, over a period of about 3 years.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Yeah,
And what about your other writing?
there was no other writing. I mean, I was writing these comedy scripts, and then once a year for the first 3 years, I'd get an episode of a TV show, and you know that would sustain me, and didn't pay a lot of money. I think in those days it paid 14 grand, but it kept me in the guild, and you know I could call myself a professional writer. You know, my big goal then was to get on staff at a TV show, which didn't happen, not for a few more years, or to sell one of these comedy scripts. But I didn't have an agent, and it was tough. And even when I got an agent, he didn't sign me. He just said, you know, he'd pocket me, he'd represent me, but you know, kind of unofficially, because he wasn't sure if I was going to get work. And he wouldn't sell it, not wouldn't sell. I don't know that he even tried to sell the comedy scripts. I was really trying to sell them myself. So, you know, and I've got over the years gone back and looked at them. They weren't very good. And, you know, that's kind of how I started. And eventually I got on staff. Oddly enough, ironically enough, they decided to do a, Paramount decided to do a series, Coming to America, based on the movie, with Tommy Davidson playing the Eddie Murphy part. And Eddie Murphy's company produced it. That was the first staff job that I had, but it only lasted through the pilot, you know, because it didn't get picked up. But I was working on staff for a week, and it was great. I had a place to go to work, and for me, it was a lot of money. And you know, then it was another year, and ironically enough, I ended up working for Eddie Murphy again on the Royal Family. And I think that was a year and a half or 2 years later. The Red Fox show, that was Eddie Murphy Productions. And that was my first staff job. Because that's the goal of a TV writer, is to get what is called a staff job where, they pay you weekly and you're in. You're not on an outside writing a script. And that was my first staff job, and didn't last long, and I ended up getting fired. But at least I had that under my belt. And that was sort of, if I really want to say the beginning of my career, that was kind of the beginning of my career. Working on the royal family. And oddly enough, Naya Rivera played his granddaughter. She was about 6 or 7 years old. And
Wow.
yeah.
It all comes around full circle.
All comes around full circle. It certainly does.
Yeah. So, what would you say was your first movement towards feature film screenplays?
No, I written 18 feature film screenplays, but they were comedies and I couldn't sell them. So after I got fired, I had some, a few $1,000s, which was a lot of money for me then. And I had time on my hands, so I decided to write a play. And got in this playwrights group at Los Angeles Theater Center. And that play that I developed there was called Tinseltown Trilogy, about 3 Black men on Christmas Eve in Los Angeles. And the play got produced, which was amazing in itself. I got a lot of attention. It was equity waiver, which means it was playing in small, really small theaters. But I got a lot of attention, and I got signed to ICM as a playwright. And the guy who signed me said, "Don't tell anybody about that situation comedy. No one respects that." And that's true. They do now because they make so much money. But he said, "You're a playwright." He said, "People in town respect that." So I said, "Okay, I'm a playwright. Forget comedy, situation comedy." And Tinseltown Trilogy was a drama, and that's when I found out that's where my talent was, writing drama. And then, they got me some dramatic assignments. One of the first ones, oddly enough, was Harriet. Harriet may have been the first. I called it Freedom Fire, and I wrote that. And you might say, well, why did it take, 27 years for it to get made? Well, that was the industry then. They weren't going to make something like that then, the whole industry. And I wrote an essay about this for the LA Times when Harriet came out. And I said the whole industry had to change before they'd make Harriet. There's nothing I could do. I tried for over 25 years to get it made, but the industry had to change. But that was the first, I'm pretty sure Harriet was the first assignment I got. And that, then I was a screenwriter, and I was the only one, the only screenwriter in town. There was, of course, Singleton and Spike, and Spike preceded me and John. Me and John started the same year, within months of each other. He was directing Boys in the Hood, and I was writing Harriet. He got a lot more acclaim because he was a director-writer. But I was, but in terms of timing, we started at the exact same time. And there were no other Black writers or Black directors who were working at that time. This is like 1990. None. I mean none. I mean zero. And all the writing rooms for every single show were white, 100%, and probably 90% male. They didn't think women were funny, so women couldn't work then. So it was white males, that dominated all that TV stuff, dramas and comedy, and there were no other Black writers. I was it. Matter of fact, my agent told me, he said, "There's no Black screenwriters, and I'm gonna make you the first one." And that was kind of it.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of jump ahead because that's kind of relevant to now with
Yeah,
the whole social movement of equality.
right.
How much would you say the times have changed from then until now?
Oh, there's no comparison whatsoever. None. Let me say this again. There were, well, first of all, there's only three networks, four really, but each one had whatever, 30 shows. So you're talking about 100, 150 shows. And the staffing of those shows was entirely white males, 100%. Even the couple of, a couple of black shows were written by white writers. There was nobody black working in television as a writer, producer, nobody. And then on the screenwriting side, I was the only black screenwriter. And, Spike was the only black director and writer director, and John was the only black. So that was it. And then you flash forward 30 years, and my God, black writer producers are dominating TV and making some real headway and getting some real attention in the screenwriting world. So it is like night and day. And the irony is, I moved from Los Angeles probably like in 91, 92. So I don't know these people. People always say, such as I don't, because I wasn't here. I was living back east. So I'd come back into town and do my thing and leave. I had no idea all this integration was going on with all these people. So I'm kind of disconnected from them as a group. And there's so many of them now, and it's a little weird, because I did an interview for the Writers Guild. This guy was head of like the Black Writers Committee. He said, "Yeah, you're OG." I said, "I guess that just means I'm old."
Freeze here.
I wasn't mentoring anybody simply because I didn't know they were around. And then I'd hear about something, I'd hear about a person, you know. But I gotta tell you, I'm really shocked that the industry has changed so much. I mean, they had time to change, but I'm still shocked that the industry's changed so much from when I started. I wish it was like that when I started.
Yeah, I'm going to come back and revisit that, but I'm going to go backwards in time to you as a playwright and you writing scripts. What would you say was your first big screenplay?
First big screenplay in terms of a paycheck? What do you mean?
In terms of a paycheck, in terms of.
Well, probably Ali. I wasn't at the time produced, so there's a cap on how much they're going to pay you. But that was certainly, the most important thing that I wrote at that time, and it was the biggest paycheck at that time. But the checks, once I was produced, once Titans came out, the checks kept getting bigger and bigger. But there's two classes of screenwriters in Hollywood. There's produced and unproduced. And the big breakthrough for me was getting produced. Because once you're produced, that means whatever you wrote was good enough that a studio put money in it. And that means a lot. Because if you're not produced, and there was a period there, a long period, years, when I'm just working, but I wasn't produced. And it was really frustrating. I even talked to John about it. He said, "Don't worry about it. Just keep working." Because I wasn't going to be a director. I had no interest in it whatsoever. I was a writer. But a writer in Hollywood is in a subordinated position because you're not making the movie. In fact, I got fired from a project about the Negro Leagues because me and the director didn't get along. Thomas Carter. He's an asshole. And he went to the studio and got me fired, even though they loved the script. And I said, but you love the script. He said, we still love the script. But are you going to get up that's what the executive told me. Said, you going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and make the movie? I said, no. And that was it. They gave me something else, but, directors have all the power. And the writers exist because the directors allow them. And it shouldn't be like that at all. you take, the top screenwriter in town, probably Aaron Sorkin. If he works on a movie and there's a director who just graduated from SC Film School, that new director who hasn't even directed in Hollywood before has more power than a guy that's won multiple Oscars as a writer. And it shouldn't be like that at all. If you're that on that level as a writer, you know, a novice director shouldn't have that kind of power over you. But, I'm spitting in the wind because that's the way it is, because you don't get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and make the movie.
Right. So I want to revisit Ali.
Yeah.
Because I know that there was a special relationship with you and Ali, and there was more writing that you did about Ali that for me was some of the most important writing that I've read. So can you talk a little bit about that relationship and some of the other writing that you did?
I got the best thing that came out of Ali was not the movie, because the movie was flat, because of Michael Mann. But what came out of it for me, I got to be friends with Ali and his wife. His wife is like my sister. And so I had 25-year friendship with Ali and his wife and got to travel with him and everything. And Ali loved the fact that I did all this research. So when we go somewhere, he'd say, do some research, find out about this guy. He did that with Castro. And, I got to be his friend. So I became sort of their official writer. And, when they wanted something written about Ali, he did a tribute to Nelson Mandela. His wife called me up and said, can you write it as though Muhammad was speaking it? In other words, put it in his voice. And I did. I could do that. It's easy to do. But I did writing for him, and it was great. I wrote the obituary for him. And also the GOAT book. The GOAT book was the greatest of all time. It's a coffee table book from Toshin. Cost $7,000. Although they do sell a small version of it that has everything in it, but it's this big, whereas the GOAT book is that big. And I think that's only $150. They call that the mini GOAT. And that has the GOAT book has 4 of my essays in it. They reached out to me. I wrote about his kids, and I know all of them. I'm an expert on Ali. I probably know more about him than anybody but his wife. I'm an expert. I've been studying him for decades. And wrote about the relationship with him and his father, and his friendship with Howard Bingham. And the introduction of the GOAT book, the first essay in the $7,000 GOAT book, is my essay, Rumble in an Urban Jungle. And I'm very proud of that, that out of all those essays, it's a coffee table book, so it's really about the pictures, but they do have essays. And mine was chosen as the first essay in the $7,000 GOAT book, which is at Toshin stores. There's a Toshin store on Miami Beach. You go in the store and say, where's the GOAT book? It's on a stand. And like I said, it's this big. And if you flip from the beginning, going about 20 pages, the first essay you come to is the one I wrote, Rumble in an Urban Jungle, which is about rumble in the jungle. And I saw it when I was very young at Madison Square Garden. And it was a seminal event for me. And I got to, on his 70th birthday, I got to read that essay to him on his 70th birthday at a celebration in Louisville, which is what I always wanted to do. Because I'm really convinced that Ali was dyslexic. He never read a book all the way through. It wasn't lack of intelligence or focus, but I'm pretty sure he was dyslexic, and they didn't know enough to diagnose that then. So I'm sure he didn't read the essay that I wrote for the GOAT book, but I got to read it to him, and that was a moment. So I got a lot out of that, working on the movie. I'm the only one who was involved in Ali that he was friends with. He didn't cut the rest of them loose. He just didn't have a relationship with them. But, I'm happy to say I had a relationship with him 25 years.
Yeah, and this is relevant as well because you had One Night in Miami that it came out recently, and it's nominated for quite a few awards. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I got it here. I got to catch up. Just
Well,
I can't remember. Oh, Coming to America. I haven't seen anything. I've seen 2 movies in 3 months.
oh wow.
But I got it here. I'm gonna see it.
Okay, I'd love to get your take on that.
Right.
So,
Fictional meeting.
yeah, of course it
Right.
is.
They knew each other, but that was a fictional meeting. What happened after he won the championship? Um, Elijah Muhammad called and gave him a name. Elijah Muhammad never really liked sport, what he calls sporting life or sporting events. And so he kept him at an arm's distance. But when he won, when he won, it's like that night he gave him a name. He said, "Yeah, this Cassius X, not good. I'm gonna give you a name." He named him Muhammad Ali that night,
Wow.
and
Yeah,
that's pretty powerful.
that is. That
Yeah.
is. So I want to get back into the power of Gregory Allen Howard. I rewatched Remember the Titans the day before yesterday. It
Right.
stands as strong today
Right.
as it did when it first came out. And we every year it comes over and over and over again. And oftentimes when I open up my Disney Plus app, I see Remember the Titans right there on the front page.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about Remember the Titans, how that happened and the process of that film?
Yeah. Well, I moved back east. This is like in 91, and I moved to Alexandria. This is why I believe in karma. Everybody said, "Why'd you move to Alexandria?" I said, "I want to live in New York. I already done that, and it's expensive. It's not like I had a lot of money. Although if I had moved there and bought an apartment, boy, that thing would be worth a fortune now." But anyway, so I was looking for some place in the Northeast or thereabouts. Didn't know anything about Philadelphia, and I had about 4 cousins in the DC area. So I said, "Okay, I'll live in DC." I never lived there, been there, and so I chose DC. And Alexandria's right across the bridge from DC. And once I got there, I was really amazed by the fact there was this level of integration, which I had never really seen before. And there was social integration too. Even DC doesn't have real integration because after 5, black and white go their separate ways. But in Alexandria, there's all this integration. And I said, "Well, why is that? How's that possible?" They said, "Well, a high school football team integrated our city." I said, "I don't believe that." And then I did research and found out, yeah, that was it. So I met the coaches and told them I want to do a movie about this. I was unproduced at the time, so they didn't take it seriously. And, I got their rights and then tried to sell it, and nobody wanted to buy it as a pitch. And, I pitched everywhere, and everybody said no. So I decided to write it on spec, and wrote it on spec and then sent it out and got rejected again. Only one producer in town was interested. One on the entirety of Hollywood, and that was Chad Oman, who was Jerry Bruckheimer's sort of junior partner. And he was found out later from Texas, and knew about the culture of high school football, and there's a culture around it. And he gave it to Jerry, and Jerry was like, "Okay, yeah," which was unusual at the time because he'd never done anything like that. But Jerry wanted Friday Night Lights, but got beat in the bidding for that Brian Grazer got it instead. So Jerry always wanted to do a high school football movie because the culture around high school football in America, particularly the South and the Midwest, it's a big deal. Um, and so, 2 years after they optioned it, we were shooting the movie. I mean, it's really the speed of light. And once again, when I was on the set, I asked Jerry, I said, what do you think is going to happen? He said, hey, if we do everything right, it'll do $40 million, He said, I don't care. I really love the script, and that's it. And then it ended up doing like $117 million domestic. It overperformed anything anybody could have imagined because it was emotional and it struck a chord. So it was really pretty amazing. And now it's become a classic. A classic. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. Everybody in America has seen Titan. I mean, everybody.
Yeah. How much was the budget on Titans?
Budget was $30 million, which now looking in retrospect, that would be the equivalent today of 40. But they were spending more money for movies then. It wasn't considered high budget. It wasn't considered low. And the reason it was 30 is because we had Denzel, and Jerry's fee and Denzel's fee. They still didn't get their full upfront money. They gave them points. What Eddie Murphy called monkey points, because you got to be a monkey if they're going to pay off. But they didn't give them monkey points, which are net points. They gave them gross points. They said, listen, we're not going to pay you what your quote is, but we'll give you a lot of points. Because they didn't think, that's not going to turn into anything. And according to Denzel and his agent, he made more money from Titans than any movie he's ever done to this day.
Oh, wow.
And they stopped sending me the statements, but I mean, I saw how much he was making from it because they gave him a lot of points, and Titans made a fortune. I mean, Titans made $200-300 million in the DVD market, did 150, 140 worldwide. Then in streaming and cable and everything, Titans generated hundreds of millions of dollars. And Jerry and Denzel had grossing. It paid off. Matter of fact, when Herman Boone, the black coach, visited Denzel in L.A., and Denzel had just finished building this huge new house. And Herman said, God damn, Denzel, this is a big house. Where can I sleep? Denzel said, you can sleep anywhere you want. I made a fortune from Titans.
Wow. And it's still going. I mean, I'm sure you're still getting residuals.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. It's classic. And I even asked the Guild, I said, how many years is he going to pay, these residuals? And they told me it's an evergreen. The guy in the Guild said some movies and TV shows, some movies pay forever. Pay 40 years later, they become what are called evergreens. They're always paying off. He said Titans is an evergreen. It's always going to pay off. I said, great. Wow.
Yeah, that's something. Did you meet Denzel Washington then during the filming of the movie?
No, I knew him before then. I didn't know him well, but I met Denzel when I broke in. When I was Flavor of the Month as a writer, when I broke in, very first broke in. I had, and he wasn't a movie star then. He'd done that TV show, but I met him. Yeah, I knew him now. He's turned into, one of the biggest stars in the world. But yeah, I knew him, not well, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that has to be something that, he's still getting that paycheck from what you wrote way back then. So
is Jerry. Yeah, they're still
Jerry, right.
Yeah. Boy, they made out.
Yeah. So Titans, moves forward. You're on the high of Titans. Are you writing while that Titans is moving,
You know,
or do you
you
take a
never,
little?
I always think it's funny people say, "You still writing?" Why wouldn't I be? That's like a doctor. And they say, "Are you still performing surgeries?" No, I decided to stop. Of course, you never stop doing what you're doing. You don't really, artists really don't retire. I don't know why. I've thought about it, but artists don't, it's not that. I think it's because art is not considered a job. It's not considered something you do and then you stop doing it. But artists never retire. If they're physically not able, maybe a violinist or something like that, or a singer. But that's usually when they're in their 80s, when they physically can't do the art. You know, like Tony Bennett now has Alzheimer's. What is he, 90, 91? I don't know if that's really, so he can't remember the words. So they'll probably have to use teleprompter, which Frank Sinatra used very late in his career. He couldn't remember the words, so he used the teleprompter. But if you're physically not able to continue doing your art, then you have to stop. But all the artists I know and know of, they basically did until they died.
Right. While we're in the pocket of Titans, I want to get to one of our questions, and this is at the top here. One of our Karen Hall, I think this is. I want to hear you talk about mixing fact and fiction when depicting a true story. How does a person judge when it's an okay time to fudge, and when must we stick to the exact truth?
Well, it's not a documentary. You have to make a judgment. And that's why it's very important for you to know, why am I involved in this project? Why am I writing? Why am I making this movie? You got to ask yourself that question. And that will determine the degree of fictionalization. Okay? I try to keep 75, 80% truth, because that's why I got involved in the project in the first place, because of what happened. If you get to the point where you're fictionalizing half of it, what's the point of doing it? And I always tell people in meetings, what attracted you to this in the first place? If that's what attracted you in the first place, is use a story or a character, why the fuck are we changing everything? It doesn't make any sense. One of my good friends, this guy, we don't really talk that much anymore, just because our careers went in different directions. Steve James, the guy did Hoop Dreams, and he told me, he said, if we had written this as a screenplay, it would have been rejected everywhere. And he's right, because it took all these twists and turns. So my feeling is, fact is stranger than fiction. Stay with the facts. But at the same time, how accurate was Julius Caesar's, how accurate was Shakespeare's Julius Caesar? Did Mark Antony really say French Roman country? Who the hell knows? Shakespeare never met a king. I always say that. Shakespeare never met a king. Wrote about him all the time.
Right.
So, there's levels of this. There's no legal department at any studio is going to let you say a true story, because you may as well just open yourself up to 100 lawsuits based on a true story. Gives you a little bit of leeway. Inspired by a true story, you're probably close to the 50% mark in terms of fictionalization. If you say inspired by events, that means almost none of it. You may as well just make up a story. 'Cause that means all and the
Inspired
lawyer,
by true events.
yeah, inspired by true events. That doesn't mean anything. That means the only thing true in that is somebody's name. But you know, if the legal department reads that and says inspired by true events, there's no truth in this whatsoever. Yeah. So all mine have been based on a true story. That really is the gold standard. There's no legal department that's going to allow you to say a true story because you'll be sued with you'll be sued based on a true story. We were sued for not sued. The guy filed a complaint for Titans. Some idiot in like Utah got some corrupt attorney to contact Disney and say this was my client's high school life. He stole his stuff. And the Disney lawyer called me about. I said, you know, the people I wrote about are alive. Now you know that, right? They aren't made up characters. I give you their phone numbers. They're real people. I don't know who the hell this guy is, and I've never been to Utah. He said, I know. Well, don't worry, we'll get rid of it. I just wanted to make sure. I still wonder about. Let me say this again. The principals in the story are alive. How could he say it's him? But he got a lawyer to file a complaint. They got it was summary dismissal. But that just goes to show you, you know, when you put it out there, even based on a true story, that's why they give themselves a little bit of wiggle room. And I'm careful, you know, you can use people, but you know, I couldn't make the white coach a drug dealer. You can't do that. Can I show him as a coach and put words in his mouth? Of course. I'll give you a good example. The white coach in Titans had this wonderful relationship with his daughter. You know, she had, in real life, she had 4 sisters.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
The little girl, the daughter of the white coach, they had a wonderful relationship, but she actually in real life had 4 sisters.
Oh, wow.
And a wife. Initially I wrote about it. And then Jerry said, no, we want the little girl. We don't want the rest of the family. You got to cut them out. I said, oh man, I can't do that. I said, I'm friends with him now, Jerry. He said, I'm not going to he said, don't worry. I said, I can't tell him. He said, I'll be on the phone with you. One thing I'll say that I really admire about him, he has no problem getting on the phone or meeting someone. If you tell him we need this, he's there. Some of these producers think they're so goddamn important, they can't, oh yeah, I'm not going to talk. But Jerry get on the phone. He's not shy at all. And we told him, and the man, I think, in fact, we told him in person, but I mean, good God, he cried and protested, called Disney. You can't do this. You can't cut out her sister. You know? Hey, you got to tell us, you know, I learned, you got to tell a story. You got to be ruthless.
Right. I'm going to go into the second question because it's kind of related to how you went about researching Titans. And this is from Angela Turga. Can you talk about the research skills you acquired at Princeton? And then I'm going to add to that, did those research skills help you in terms of researching for your stories?
Well, of course they help me. I mean, that's when I'm not doing anything really different than what I did in college. Find a topic and then research it. The research skills that I developed in college are the exact same ones I use today. That's why, you know, when I tell people, they say, what's the best background for being a screenwriter? I said, honestly, in my opinion, if you're going to be doing true stories, a history, because you learn how to research. And, you know, you better embrace it. That's where you get the detail, and the detail is what makes it great. Otherwise, it's generic, you know. But the detail is what makes it, and you find the detail from research. So yeah, it's the same thing. You know, I've become a semi-expert in several topics because I wrote a script about it. Like I knew about World War II because I wrote a World War II movie, but I didn't know about the Eastern Front. I knew about it from the Western Front where the Americans fought. But I kept hearing these stories about the Eastern Front where the Russians fought. And then I wrote a script about that. And I did all this research on the Eastern Front. My God, now I see what they were talking about. And I know enough about the Eastern Front. I could teach a high school history course in it easily because I read about a dozen books and I could teach a course in it. Anything that I sort of get into, high school, not college, but I certainly could teach a high school course. And that's the level at which you should achieve before you dive into something.
Wow, that says a lot. And that reminds me of something that I wanted to mention when you talked about Hoop Dreams, which
Yeah,
is it's a documentary. It's one of my favorite documentaries. It won the Academy Award.
right.
Just brilliant, brilliant documentary about basketball players.
Didn't win
Um,
an Academy
or
Award.
nominated for an Academy Award.
Bunch of hoopla over it. They actually changed the voting rules. That documentary branch was a little incestuous toilet. And because it didn't get nominated, and it should have, it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and so it was about some kids that started in high school and their journey throughout high school to go to college and then towards the pros. Just brilliant, brilliant documentary, and that's really telling, that line between biopic and documentary that you mentioned, Hoop Dreams. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they had,
so
it wouldn't have sold.
yeah, well, um, I actually want to talk about some of the other projects that you worked on. Have you worked on any basketball projects?
Yeah, I wrote one. Trying to get it off the ground now. I mean, it's I shouldn't say, but it's an oldie but goodie about a black guy who became the coach of an Amish Mennonite high school basketball team and won the state championship. Amazing story. He was the only black man in the entire county, and did it with Bruckheimer. They chose to do Glory Road, which I also worked on as a production rewrite. And so they put that on the side and they said, we'll make it, and that was, God only knows how many years ago that was. But he called me up about Chad, about 4 or 5 months ago and said, we're going to make it now. What do you think of this actor? I said,
Wow.
fantastic. It's a great story. And they don't stay in touch. I stay in touch with all the people I've written scripts about and become friends with. Doesn't mean I won't cut them up and chop them up, because I do, and I'm pretty ruthless about it. But I'm still nevertheless, I become friends with it. So I stay in touch with it even after all this time.
Wow. You mentioned that you did a production rewrite on Glory Road, and you did some writing
Yeah.
on Glory Road. Can you talk about that and what that is exactly?
Well, they approached me. We were at a premiere of something, one of their movies, and Jerry walked up to me and said, we need some help with Glory Road. I said, you're doing Glory Road, that basketball movie, instead of mine, and now you want me to cut my own throat by helping you with it? He said, come on, Greg, you're family. I said, oh, okay. I am family because family members abuse each other. And, they talked me. I gave them notes and told them, here's what you need to do. I said, let the writer do it. They said, no, we're done with him. We want you. We want you to come to New Orleans and work on this. Oh, okay. I was very reluctant because, again, I'm cutting my own throat. They had a choice to either do my high school basketball movie or that basketball movie, which was college. And they chose to do that one because Ben Affleck had committed to it. And then he bailed out. and ended up with Josh Lucas. But I was cutting my own throat, and but I was a good sport about it. It paid me a lot of money, and I was down there for probably 6 weeks. And I'll tell you a brief story about research. So, the script was okay. It wasn't terrible at all. It was, certainly serviceable, kind of by the numbers. And I don't like to talk shit on another writer's work, but it was, good enough. Wasn't good enough for Ben. That's why Ben bailed out. So they wanted me to sort of elevate it and also to put some emotion in it. So I said, I need to know the players a little better. And they said, listen, we're shooting in 4 weeks. We don't have any time for you to do research. I said, you always have time for research. And I told the director, and I said, let's take them to let's take 4 or 5 of them to dinner individually. And we took them to dinner, and the first one turned into disaster because the kid was so boring and he just droned on. He had no news stories or insights or anything. And then when we were at the end of the dinner, the director was looking at me like, I just wasted a day and we're shooting in 4 weeks. And the kid said, they gave him a mint. And he said, oh, this mint. He said, don't forget, New Orleans had just gone through Katrina. So the government was giving them packages of they call them pre-meal something. They got an abbreviation for it. And there was these mints, these mints, and they were laxative mints because this food they were giving them was constipating. And I said, laxative mints? I said, did you know that? He said, no, we didn't. We just gobbled down the food and then ate the mint at the end. And then we went to practice. And then we had to break practice because everybody had to shit. I said, oh my God, that was the moment. And that's in the movie. That wasn't in the script. That came from that interview with that kid. That's why you interview people. And that's why you do research, because you're looking for a little nugget of gold like that. Now, you couldn't have made something. Who would have known that? Except the kid that went through it, who ate the laxative mint at the end of the meal. And it was hysterical. They ran out of practice and ran in the bathroom, and everybody's fighting over toilets. It's hilarious. So we picked up about 3 or 4 of those every interview, and all you wanted in an interview is one thing. You might get 2. You're not going to get 10. You just want one thing, and you don't know what the thing is.
Yeah. So that movie I've seen a couple of times. I'm friends with Derek Luke.
Right.
So it's another movie that I love. And now that
who couldn't dribble a basketball? They had.
Are you kidding me?
No, couldn't dribble a basketball. Wow. If you look at it closely, you'll see that's not him on the court. He's on the court when they did close-ups, but he couldn't even dribble a basketball. That's nothing. What's his name? Leonardo did a movie about a junkie basketball player. He couldn't dribble a basketball. And basketball aficionados can look at it and tell. I mean, I could tell he didn't feel comfortable on a court.
Right. I mean, he did a great job. I love the movie.
Yeah, it's the movie business, and they know how to cover that stuff up.
Yeah, I have a question, and this is related to, you said 80% to 20%. Right. So you're shooting for that 80% fact, and then that 20%. You talked a little bit about that 20% when you spoke on the girl in Remember the Titans.
Right.
And she had a bigger family. Can you talk a little bit more about that 20% and some of the other things?
Well, it's either going to be cuts. Usually it's cuts. You have to cut people out because you don't have enough time to deal with them, and you got to focus. So usually it's cuts. Sometimes it's compositing characters. You got 2 characters basically doing the same thing. You either cut them out or composite them, put them together. Then you have to time shift. Shockingly, life doesn't lay out like a screenplay always. So you have to move events around. It's called time shifting. You're not violating the spirit of the story, but you have to move things around, to make them fit into a screenplay structure. And, those are the main things. You just got to look at it and say, once again, always go back to that point. Why am I doing this story? What attracted me? Okay. When you get into that, you're going to change this thing so much it's unrecognizable. You shouldn't do it. You got to maintain the spirit of whatever the piece is.
So is time shifting taking something that happened at one time and moving it
Yeah.
before?
That football game at the end of the season in Titans, that was the 5th game of the season. Well, I shouldn't surprise you. It's a goddamn movie. Of course, you're going to have a triumphant ending. Otherwise, you don't have a movie. And I was just talking to a director. He was doing a movie. I won't mention any names, but he was doing a movie about a boxer. And the boxer said, I loved everybody. I said, if he's going to take that approach, you don't have a movie. If he wasn't in conflict with anyone, if he wasn't angry, if he didn't, if he wasn't fighting outside the ring, I said, if he wants to take that approach, you should tell him, we can't make a movie. There's nothing more boring than do-gooders doing good. I just saw that in, what was that movie, Just Mercy? A whole movie about do-gooders doing good. Boring. You want do-gooders doing bad, or bad people doing good. You don't want do-gooders doing good. It's the most boring and people, I don't know, for some reason people don't understand that. Oh, these are good people. We're going to make a movie about do-gooders doing good.
Is there a biopic that you love, that you've seen?
Oh, that many. You can go back to Amadeus. The most recent one was Two Popes, which I would almost put in my top 10 of movies ever made. It's the hardest thing to do is two guys talking, because there's nothing to support it. So it's 90% the script, maybe 95%. No, 90% the script and 10% acting, or 80% the script, 20% acting. But the hardest thing is to do what is called in theater a two-hander. We got two people talking. There's nothing around it. There's no car crashes. There's none of this. A director can't use a bunch of devices. Just two people talking. That's what Two Popes is. Two people talking. And let me tell you something. Couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Didn't want to miss a word or a second, because you have two of the greatest actors in the world, two of the greatest cinema actors in the history of film, two of the greatest. And then a script that was magnificent. I know it started out as a play. I can tell because I'm a playwright. And sure enough, it started out as a play. I knew it, because to get to that level of craft would have taken years. And I'm not sure you can get to that level of craft through the vehicle of a screenplay. You'd have to do that on stage first, hear it 100 times to make those changes, and then you could adapt it. But as far as writing that as an original screenplay, impossible. That thing was as dense as you could be dramatically. It was just utterly brilliant. So what a biopic, that was the greatest one I've seen easily in the past 10 or 20 years.
Wow. It was brilliant. I mean, just amazing. I felt the same way. What about from book to screen?
I've only adapted one book, and honestly, I didn't really use that. They had optioned the book. I said, I don't need it. I get my information from the source. Two reasons. One, people who write these bios don't ask the right questions. In other words, the questions they're going to ask is to write a book. They're different from the questions I need for a movie. So I need to interview people myself. I don't like books because they're generally not good, and even if they are good, they don't answer the questions that I need for a movie. So and writers love them because they're lazy. And then all they got to do, and they'll go in there and wink and nod to the executive and say, okay, I'm going to adapt the book. And in the book, there's this and that, and that. They're all excited because they optioned the book. So they're invested in the book, even though the book's not helpful to write a movie. I've almost never seen one that was adapted. And they send them to me all the time. I've been in this business 30 years. I've adapted one book, one. And if they got a book, I'm not doing it. I said, I start from the ground floor and figure it out. Because they're all happy. The executives love to have something they can hang their hat on, something they can keep from getting fired from. And that's generally a book.
Right. So I'm gonna time shift to Harriet.
Go ahead.
And you said that you wrote Harriet 27 years ago.
Yeah.
So what was
maybe now 30? Yeah. What about it?
So what was it that allowed that to happen? What was it that allowed that to move?
Well, the industry changed. The LA Times did a story on me, which anybody can Google. And in it, I talked about how the industry has changed and that, the whole industry had to change. When I was taking Harriet around 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I literally was getting thrown out of offices. And in the story that the LA Times did for me, I think, I mentioned in passing when I wrote it 27 years ago, Hollywood Pictures, which was the studio, division of Disney at the time, the head of the studio, said, this is a great story. Why don't we get Julia Roberts to play Harriet Tubman? There's one black executive in that room, and she said, Harriet Tubman was a black woman. He said, it was so long ago, nobody remember that. Now, I just mentioned that as the genesis of the Harriet Tubman story. Yes, it was racist. Is it the most racist thing I've encountered or heard of? Not hardly. Not hardly. I just thought, race. So what? Some of this stuff is so what? So what I call so what racism. So what? You're shocked by that? I wasn't shocked then. I'm not shocked now. And that, for some reason, turned into a meme. And there was a point at which I was the most famous screenwriter in the world. It even ended up on Saturday Night Live. The incongruity of Julia Roberts being proposed to play Harriet Tubman. Tens of thousands. I don't even know. Hundreds of thousands of mentions everywhere. They were so shocked. And I was talking to a big producer and her partner, who's a black man, an actor, been around a long time. And I said, I just don't understand the reaction. We've been in the business 30 years each. It's not even the most racist thing I've encountered. And she said, yeah, they're shocked that Hollywood was and is racist. I said, yeah, why are they shocked? Do they not work? She said they don't work in the business. If they worked in the business, they would have handled it like I did. It's racist, But so the industry, the point of the article was not that. I just mentioned that fast. But the industry had to change. More than any single thing, I think Black Panther changed things. For Harriet, it was 12 years a slave. Because my agent would always say, I think making blah, 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 blah. 12 years a slave did $200 million worldwide. I said, you can't tell me a slave movie can't make money. You can't tell me that. And so we got it done. The 12 years a slave cut, that turned it loose. Yeah.
Why did you choose to write Harriet as opposed to any other?
Listen, I was a history major with a minor in Afro-Am. She's not. I got into the business, the film business, to write iconic stories or stories about Black icons. Okay. And she was one of them. I really wanted to do Malcolm X, but couldn't do that. Spike already did it. I want to do Malcolm X, King. I want to do the icon stories.
There's Frederick Douglass. There's,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many.
yeah. The fact that this little 5 foot woman, you know, beat these people was just amazing to me. And the way that I wanted to present it was to make it an action adventure movie. That's the only one I would go to. Okay. It had to be exciting. And my original script had 50% more action. But I shared credit on it with the director. The director toned down, some of the action, took it out. Nothing I could do about that. But if you had left it to me, it would have, it would have been like a Michael Bay movie. It would have had so much action in it. I mean, really and truly, my big thing is, am I bored? Am I looking at my watch? Am I bored? I don't bore people. When I write, you're sitting on the edge of your seat. I'm very conscious of the fact that there's a saying in music, don't bore us, get to the chorus. See, I get to the chorus.
Right. Well, in that, I'm going to field another question. And this has to do with dialogue.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry to eat. I didn't finish my lunch. Go ahead.
No, we want to keep it going. So whatever keeps it going. The question is, I asked myself, what would the character have said to construct dialogue in a biopic? How do you choose the words?
If you got to think like that, you're not a writer. If you do the research on your character will come full blown in your imagination. I don't think when I write. Why would I do that?
So it's diving into the research, and that research should inform the dialogue.
The character should come full blown to you. If you're thinking too much, you're not a writer. You got to keep writing until it's like breathing.
Right. 18 scripts when you first started. 18 scripts. That's like in 3 years. That's the type of work that you need to put into it.
18.
Right. So I'm going to go back to Ali. I'm trying to field as many questions as possible as we come towards the tail end. And this is going back to Ali. How much does your script for Ali differ from the final film? Now, this is an interesting story. So,
well, it's 100% different. I mean, I wrote a file. See, once again, I believe if you do a biopic, it should be you should put a biopic in genre, so that then it becomes a type of movie. Biopic by itself is not a type. So I wrote a father-son story. You can write a buddy story. You can write a coming-of-age story. Those are types. They're called genres. And if it's a coming-of-age story, then you can put the biography behind it. In other words, you try to hide that it's a biopic, and you hide it behind one of the genres. The hide, in my case, the thing that the Ali movie was hiding behind was a father-son story. And that's the through line for the movie. Well, Michael Mann referred to my script as domestic melodrama.
Okay.
Which it probably was, but at least it was about something. I'll ask you, you saw Ali. What was Ali about? And I don't mean the fighting and everything. Here's the way you know if you have a movie and a true story. Take away the events, do you still have a movie? Take away the events in Titans, still have a movie about racial reconciliation. You could move Titans to the factory floor of a car manufacturer. You can move it anywhere. Didn't need football. Football is just background. Take the football away, and you still have a movie about racial reconciliation. Take away the events in the Ali movie. What is there? Nothing. Nothing.
Right. And
That's how you know.
you wrote the original script for Ali.
Yeah, I was the first writer. You know, and honestly, if the head of the studio hadn't been fired, they would have made it. But you know, again, if they had made that then, you know, that was almost 30 years ago, 27 years ago, you know, I would have gotten awards and blah, blah, blah. Whole different career trajectory. And there would have been no Titans. So karma has its place. Okay. If I had hit and gotten produced then 27 years ago, whole different career. But there would have been no I wouldn't have moved, first of all. There would have been no Titans, would have been no Harriet. Would I have liked to see more of my movies made? Of course. I'm still trying to get them made, but you know, I have to accept the good and the bad of my career. And the bad is I don't get that many movies made. The good is when they are made, they're pretty special. So
absolutely. And Cynthia Erivo, she was nominated for 2 Oscars for Harriet.
right.
That says so much.
Erivo.
Erivo. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to get a beginning writer's question for new writers wanting to enter into the business of writing films. Do you recommend any fellow programs or studios that work with aspiring writers, particularly for those of us who are considered middle-aged? And a thanks on that.
There is age discrimination. I'm not going to tell you there's not for writers. But it's all what's on the page. You know, Toni Morrison wrote her first book. I think she was 40, 41 years old. It's never too late. It's all based on what's on the page. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But there, you know, I'm not going to tell you there's not age discrimination. You know, if you're 60, I don't think they're going to come to you writing a teen angst comedy. But there's enough work for everybody. But it's all based on what's on the page. That's it. You got to get an agent, though. It has to be good enough to get an agent. That's the first hurdle. It took me 3.5 years. Everyone wants a shortcut. I don't know a shortcut. All I can tell you is what I went through to get an agent. And I had to give blood. People don't like to hear my Abe Lincoln story, you know, how I walked 10 miles to school. But maybe I did it the hard way because I'm stupid. I don't know. It's just I only know one way to do it. If you got a shortcut, God bless you. I didn't have any contact. I literally just get on the phone and call people 50 times. It didn't mean anything to me to call someone 20 or 30 times. Nothing. What did I have to do? I'm sitting in a gang neighborhood and I got a phone.
Right. I really don't know anyone that of note that has not done it the hard way that people would know out there. So I don't think that there is a shortcut, actually.
It probably is. I don't know it. You should
maybe an uncle or
have some other writers. Well, you know, and most of the time you'll find they had some kind of contact. But if you don't have a contact, it is a bitch. Oh my God, is it hard? Oh, is it hard?
So this is a new day and age, and you know the streamers, and this has happened really fast. Actually, it feels, you know, the streamers over the past 2-3 years have really taken over.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about the new environment and
well, everybody's working. I mean, that's good. It's good that everybody's working. The downside is the dilution of talent. There's not that much talent in Hollywood. It really isn't. It's 500 shows on the air. How many are watchable? 10, maybe. I don't even know if there's 10, maybe 5. There's not. Now, 500, right? And maybe 5 of them are good. The Crown, you know, some. not just good. 5 of them are great. Okay. 5 more are watchable and what I'll call good. After that, it falls off a cliff.
Hmm.
How many of them do you watch? I always ask people, how many do you watch? And they start naming shows. I said, okay, yeah, you're at 10. Yeah, but there's 500. You mean to tell me you don't watch number 100, 200, 3? And literally every week, there's a new one. And I look at the premise. I don't even watch the show. I don't have time. And I know they're bad. And I just look at the premise, 2 girls in Wisconsin and, they open a pizza parlor. Really? I'm going to spend hours watching that about 2 girls in Wisconsin who open a vegan pizza parlor. Oh, wow. That's what the 500 is made of. So, but listen, I'm happy writers are working. That's good. But the dilution, it used to be, again, I sound like an old man, which I am, but it used to be that you really needed some talent to break in, really needed some talent. And the quality, because there wasn't very much content, it's pretty high. Okay. Content, quality is pretty high. But creatively, you can't support 500. There aren't 500 brilliant people creating shows. There just aren't. There aren't 200. There aren't 100. Like I said, 10. And I don't even watch all the 10. I don't know anybody who does. They say, well, I sample that. So what do you really want? And you know what they come down to? 5. The Crown being one of them, obviously The Crown, maybe Bridgerton and a couple other things. Schitt's Creek, it's a handful. I said, what about the other 495? I don't have time to watch them. But you mean the 2 girls with a pizza parlor in Wisconsin, a vegan pizza parlor? I don't have time to watch that. And they really think somebody's going to watch it.
Well, the streaming wars is raging. So, but a lot of the streamers now are doing movies. I mean, Martin Scorsese, Netflix. Mm-hmm. Did you think you would have seen that time come?
Yeah, because they got money. Everything chases after money. Some of the movies on streaming are good. Some of them are bad. And unfortunately, the majority of them are mediocre. Why are they mediocre? Because they don't have to fight for box office. The pressure it takes off you to work for a streamer and doing a movie on a streamer. What is the one pressure you feel when you're doing a movie for release? Is this
audience?
It obsesses you. Obsession. Is this going to get an audience? How will an audience respond? I was working on Emmett Till, which is my current project, with Singleton until he passed away. Every single discussion we had over the course of a year, how will that play for an audience? Will an audience like that? Will that turn them off? Every single discussion was about, I don't want to say box office, but how will it play for an audience? In other words, will they come to see this? Will they like that? Because you got to please them, or else the movie's not going to do business. With a streamer, you don't have that. The pressure's off.
Right.
And you need that pressure to create great quality. You not only need the pressure, you need to embrace it so you can create great content. And I still, because I haven't worked for a streamer yet. I've only worked in feature for release, and so that concept of pleasing an audience is part of my DNA, and I have commercial instincts. I'm thinking of the audience. Like I said, don't bore us. Get to the chorus. Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to. We only have a few minutes left, but I do want to make a note, which is you were also a producer on Harriet. Yeah, so Harriet. You're a producer and writer.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, I was trying to sell it for 27 years.
Was that difficult to do?
Yeah, because you got one more job title than the other producer, and they don't like it. I've never met a producer who wanted to share the producing credit with a writer. They do it because they have to, but they don't like it. And I'm not even the lead producer. It's like somebody else. I just want a voice at the table. And I tell, my producing partners, and I'm about ready to get in bed with another one. You're the boss. I just want a voice at the table because they won't listen to a writer. I'm telling you, they won't. They look at a writer as an impediment, which is stupid.
So my last two questions are, what do you have coming up? And then to dovetail on that,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to writers coming into the business?
Well, what I have coming up is Emmett Till. We got another director, and we're hoping to get a green light to shoot this summer. Taraji's attached to play the mother. What advice?
Taraji P. Henson?
Yeah. What advice for writers coming in? A writer writes. Unfortunately, I meet these people who want to break in and they don't do any goddamn work. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, I'm almost finished my script. Really? Well, the whole world is waiting for you to finish that script. One whole script. Really? You come back to me after you've written 10 and all of them been rejected and tell me you're still ready to keep going. Nobody wants to do the work. They don't. I mean, people all the time. Nobody wants to do the work. But a real artist doesn't talk about art, talk about work. And yeah, you see Jay-Z and all these people at these premieres and everything. You have no idea how much work it goes into getting you on a red carpet. And it is work. And a lot of it. You're not sitting on your ass. So you got to be committed to the work. That's the advice. It's not for everybody, but I will say this, because there's 500 shows now. It's a whole lot easier. I mean, if I was breaking in now, I'd be able to get an agent in, I don't know, 3 weeks, because there's 500 shows. Each one of them has 7 or 8 or 10 people on staff. 5,000 runs. I was better than I was better than not all 5,000, but I was good enough to get work. If you don't get work now, it's because you have no talent. None. Not little talent, no talent. Because the universe is so huge for writers now. It's so relatively easy to break in. You don't need much talent. Back in the day when there were 4 networks, a couple of cable things, I'm telling you, you had to kill somebody to get a job. Kill them. You had to be not good, great. There weren't that many jobs, and people were killing each other for a job. Now, why do you think I had to write 18 scripts that I couldn't sell, by the way? I needed to be great just to break in. You don't need to be great anymore, but you have to do the work. So my main complaint with new people is they haven't done the work. They haven't done the work and don't want to do the work. They want me to help them get in. How the hell am I going to help you? I'm not going to help you. Help yourself. Go write 10 scripts. Now, if someone approaches me and says, I wrote 10 scripts, haven't been able to sell one, I say, okay, well, keep writing. What are you working on? See, then I'll talk to them. Then I'll engage them. And then I'll help them. I'm not going to make phone calls for them, but I'll give them some advice because I know they're serious, that they're putting in the work. But they come up to me talking that shit about, I'm almost finished a screenplay, or I'm half finished, or I've written one screenplay, and now I'm ready. Really? Okay. Good luck. The work. That's it.
The work. Well, this has been a great conversation, and that's a great way to end it. The work. I'm looking forward to the Emmett Till project that you're working on now. And I want to thank you so much. This has actually been a conversation, but it's been a masterclass. So thank you, Mr. Howard. Thank you, Mighty Film Festival. And we have to give a shout out to Sergio, our tech, on this. And we'll see you next year.
Okay, take care.